acknowledge we live on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples.
Thank you. I'd like to now get an approval of the agenda with only one sequential change. Because we've got an issue regarding the minutes, I'm going to move that to the end of the agenda because we've got a lot of substantive stuff to deal with, and I'd rather supposedly deal with that last. So could I have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated with that change?
Jessica?
Do we have anyone who needs to declare a conflict of interest relative to anything on the agenda? Somebody has a microphone that is professional. I don't know if you're in the room or at home. Just double check the case. No. All right, great. Let's proceed. Today, let me begin with my chair's report, followed by a delegation that we will hear from, that we're all looking forward to hearing about. First, I want to just advise everyone that I have invited the supervisor of the province appointed for the Toronto District School Board, Rohit Gupta, to attend our meeting. I've invited him, given him an open invitation to attend all of our meetings. And I haven't heard back, so I'm thinking he's not here now. Okay.
If I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Gupta sent his regards. He acknowledges the invitation, but is here this evening. I certainly director.
All right, thank you. I had a Zoom meeting with him last week. It was our second occasion to meet. I met with him about 6 weeks earlier. I wanted to give you just a quick update on the meeting. I take these meetings very seriously because it is an opportunity to talk directly to the person in the senior position in charge. The priorities I had earlier identified to him when I met with him the first time and when I wrote it last summer on all of our behalf are the ones we drilled down to in greater detail. The need for parents to have a comprehensive strategy that effectively educates or explains to them what is available for children with disabilities, with different disabilities or special education needs, and where and how to access them. The staff have taken steps in this area, but I said we need a lot more. I said that had there been trustees, I would have been coming to SEAC with a motion so we could bring this back to their attention, because we addressed it a year ago, and while steps have been taken, I believe we need something more comprehensive. And we need more staff backing behind it. It's not enough to just leave this all to the special education staff to try to come up with how to do this. The second thing I talked to him about was the issue of something we've raised, but that now confronts him personally, which is the parents have tried addressing the problem that their child is facing, or they believe their child is facing, whether they believe their special education or disability needs are being met. And they've gone to the principal, and they've gone to the teacher, and they've gone to the superintendent, and haven't got the solution. They don't have trustees to go to. They got to go to him, and we need an avenue that is more effective for dealing with this, and we've been pressing for this for some time. I talked to him, and we've got this on among topics I'm hoping we will get to talk about at this meeting. I told him how a year ago we held a really positive and an informative town hall for parents of students with disabilities and special education needs. told us in January that they opposed, TDSB senior staff, that they opposed this happening again this year or next. And he's in charge. We'd like a second look at this. Now, I raised this with our Director of Education here tonight, Clayton Touche, and I asked if we could come back, if we've got a different announcement or response now as a result of any deliberations he had last time. That would be helpful. Then we don't need to take up the time of the supervisor. I also talked to him about the fact that there were an issue has arisen about how our minutes are kept. Now, we're going to deal with this later in the meeting. I don't want to take up your time. I made it clear I would ordinarily not take up his time with that either. But it was more an institutional concern that I felt. That with the board running a deficit and senior staff having serious problems to deal with regarding students, all students, and especially students with disabilities, special education needs, it seemed to me that taking up their time with figuring out what our minutes should look like was questionable. I wanted to raise that. Now, let me just identify a couple of other things that are in my chair's report that I'm hoping, whether in the leadership report or in our exchanges with staff, we can address. I've asked staff to provide us with an update on the special education review. For the benefit of those new here or unfamiliar with this, the special education review is something that staff announced to us about a year and a quarter ago with a great deal of enthusiasm, and frankly, commendably so, that wanted to take a big look at how these kids are being served over a multi-year period of time, with a view to coming up with improvements. We last heard about this, and we've had issues at this table about some of how it was being done, but it's being done, and that's good. And I asked if we could be updated at this meeting on where that's at. This last we heard about it, I think, was in June, May or June. Finally, as I mentioned in my chair's report, we had a delegation last spring that was from a group of parents of kids with complex disabilities who raised an issue that a number of you said we'd like to have a talk discussed at this table. And I've asked the staff if they could give us some information on where TDSB is at with this. What their argument was, and I'm not commenting on it, I'm just summarizing it in a couple of sentences. What their argument was that the province allows the school board to have a, if you will, a specialized special education class for kids with complex multiple disabilities. And it was the contention of these individuals that TDSB is not doing that, and that would be beneficial for their kids. Now, when families or individuals or organizations make a delegation to us, we listen to them, we take away what they say, and then we will look at it, and when members are especially focused on it, as they are here, we'll turn to staff and say, okay, so that's what they told us. What's TDSB position on this? Do you have these classes? If not, do you not? Or pardon me, if not, why not? It would be helpful to know. So my chair's report laid out all of these things in written form. I will conclude by saying that at this point in the meeting, I would ordinarily say I would like my chair's report to be received and to be appended to the minutes, which is what we've been doing up until last month. Staff are opposed to that being done, and I'm just deferring all of that to the end of the meeting because I might get to substance. So with that, I'd like to call on our delegation for this month. We've had one request to make a delegation. We had a second request, but it was too late in timing, so we're going to look at that as a December opportunity. But is our presenter here in person or online? Online. So let's just I don't have a name in front of me, and I apologize, which is incredibly rude of me.
It's okay, I'm here.
It's Laura. So,
Yeah.
Laura, you have 5 minutes, and I'd love it if you would just tell us about the situation you want to bring to our attention. And as is our practice with delegations, to respect privacy of everybody involved, we ask you not to use names of children, or of schools, or of teachers, or of staff. So describe the situation, but leave names out so that we get the information without identifying you. Okay, take it away.
Absolutely, understood. Thank you very much. And thank you for this opportunity to speak to this group. I'm here tonight as a parent of 2 children who are both formally identified. I want to share a bit of our family's journey to highlight what happens in the system when they go wrong, but also what it looks like when they go right. A few years ago, our family reached a very difficult point. My youngest child was struggling at school, and despite every effort to work collaboratively with the school, things continued to decline. We brought in outside professionals, including child psychologists, attended occupational therapy appointments, started medication under medical guidance, and shared all of that information with the school in the hopes it would lead to a supportive plan. In return, we asked for clear communication and resources to help them succeed. Instead, the situation only became more challenging. Instead of teamwork, the response often felt punitive. I was told to pick up my child early, sometimes every day, with no real plan for how to get back to a full day. A modified day became a way of excluding rather than supporting, and when I continued to ask questions, the school went as far as calling child services, claiming we were withholding support from our child. Thankfully, the agency quickly recognized the report had no basis. We even received an apology from the superintendent that the damage was done. It was deeply humiliating and discouraging. Clearly, the tactic that was used to pressure us to leave our home school and not about helping our child succeed. Even after my younger child left that school, the pattern continued with my older son. My older son began to experience subtle forms of retaliation. There were small threats and unnecessary comments about him being a social worker and a safety plan. If you knew him, you would know how unreasonable this sounds. In the year and a half it took me to find a new school for my older son, I witnessed several other families quietly leave as well. Families of children who had also been identified as exceptional. It was a clear pattern, and it scares me. Once both my kids settled into their new schools, the difference was night and day. With the right leadership and a culture of inclusion, my children are now thriving academically and socially. The same children, the same needs, but a completely different outcome. It showed me firsthand that when schools put collaboration, communication, and compassion into practice, amazing things happen. And this experience revealed something bigger. Before a child is diagnosed, before there is an IEP and an IPRC, there is this gap, a period where parents are doing everything they can outside of school, yet inside the school there is no plan. No accommodations, just phone calls, SST meetings, and emails about behavior or missed expectations. In that gap, parents are gathering assessments and answers that the child has waited. That gap is where a lot of good or bad can happen because of the lack of support while the system waits for paperwork. That also raises what I think is the most important question. If the success depends so heavily on which school you attend, where does the accountability live? Where does that culture come from? And who ensures it's consistent across the system? Perhaps one way forward is through feedback directly from families. Imagine if parents of formally identified students could complete an anonymous survey rating how well their child's school follows IEPs, communicates with families, and supports inclusion, with results visible to both SEAC, the board, and the school. That kind of transparency can highlight what's working and where help is needed. The goal would be to identify which schools are struggling and which are excelling, to share those best practices and provide guidance where it's most needed. But the real goal should be to help everyone just raise the bar. You asked me a few years ago, and you never would have believed I'd be here today saying, my children are happy and learning. It's not perfect, no school is, but it proves that when staff follow protocols and work with families, it works. As a special note, I want to add that I've listened to several of these SEAC meetings, and I've been inspired by the people here, especially voices like Laura and David, who see the real picture, continue to advocate for meaningful change, and ask really important questions. Please keep going, because there are schools that are getting it right, and with your help, one day all will come up. Thank you.
I want to thank you for your presentation and your kind remarks. And while we're not being live streamed generally because of decisions by the province to which we object, I'd like you to feel welcome to stay in the Zoom meeting to watch the rest of our meeting because you're not here in person. Thank you for the time and for your thoughtful remarks. We're now going to move to an important staff presentation area that we haven't talked about in a long time. Nancy, do you want me to introduce or would you like to do an intro?
I can go ahead and do it.
Go for it.
Thanks. So good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to have staff from our planning department here tonight, and I'll have them introduce themselves shortly. As you know, one of the areas that SEAC must give input into is our special education plan, which has an entire section on accessibility of school buildings. So this presentation tonight is very timely, especially given that we are beginning work on the special education plan through our special education plan working group. So Maya, I'll pass it over to you, please, to introduce yourself and your team. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mandy, and through the chair, my name is Maya Puchetti. I am the Executive Officer of Facility Services and Planning, and I'm joined this evening online with Nadine Lavelle, who is our Senior Business Officer of Capital Revitalization, as well as Joyce Kwong, who is one of our managers in the planning department. And we're here to present something that I can tell you in my 20 plus years of working in a school board, this is the first funding announcement or dedicated funding to go towards building accessibility that I have seen. And so we are excited to present this and provide you with some information. And it is our sincere hope that this will be the beginning of more funding to come from the ministry towards accessibility in schools. So I'll turn it over to Nadine, who has a PowerPoint presentation for you.
Thank you, Maya, and good evening, everyone. Hoping everyone can hear me okay. Great, thank you. As Maya mentioned, I'm here to present about the Ministry's school renewal funding associated to accessibility. Today, I'd like to talk about a little bit of an overview about the funding from the Ministry, what projects have been identified as eligible, some of the timelines, the approach that staff have taken to this funding, what projects are being proposed, and the next steps. I'm not sure if I have control over this presentation or if I can just get the next slide. Thank you. And the following one, please. So on September 8th, the Ministry of Education issued a memo announcing a total allocation across all of the province of about $275 million. As Maya said, this is the first time that this has happened, and a very welcome opportunity and needed investment in schools across all of Ontario. As part of that funding, the Toronto District School Board received just under $48 million. Next slide. As per the memo, they identified some eligibility criteria. One of the biggest challenges that are identified as part of this is the timeline that was provided by the ministry. So the eligibility for the funding has a timeline between May 15th to August 31st, 2026, and is applicable to all schools built prior to 2015. The scope of the work that this funding can be used for is for visual fire alarms, accessible washrooms, interior barrier-free path of travels, which includes ramps, elevators, stair lifts, door operators, anything that would be required to remove any transitional barriers throughout the school. Next slide. Exterior paths of travel, so ramps allowing access into the school, handrails, door entrances and operators, as well as accessible parking. The focus is on the priority is improving accessibilities in schools, and so the ministry has excluded any administrative buildings and playgrounds and any replacement of existing accessibility infrastructure. The rationale of that last bullet is we have separate funding that's provided by the Ministry of Education to address any existing accessibility items within schools. So if there's an existing elevator, any modifications to that can't be done through this funding. It's to be done through a separate funding that the ministry provides through school condition improvement. The ministry issued this report on September 8th, and then on Monday, required a deadline of Monday, September 22nd for the proposed list of projects and plans from all school boards. So we were provided just over 3 weeks to submit a comprehensive plan for funding of the affiliated plan. Again, eligible costs are from May 15th to August 31st. I received this funding in September. That leaves us with about 10 months to implement this. Next slide. With the extremely tight timeline, we took a cross-departmental working group and put together a team of members from the manager of occupational and physiotherapy, planning members, design and renewal, and capital allocation to brainstorm what our strategy and approach is going to be to execute these projects. Next slide. There's a variety of different strategies that were reviewed. The consensus and recommendation from the group was 2 strategies, and they were mainly focused around what we call accessible learning pathways. So a learning pathway is a junior kindergarten to grade 8 school in which a student is attending the same cohort and the same students throughout that pathway. Within TDSB, we looked at the number of accessible learning pathways, and this was mapped out and to identify where there were gaps within our system. We applied a 2.5 kilometer buffer, so taking into consideration what would be suitable for students to be traveling across the city to access a school, and then doing that, we identified the pathways and established projects that would help fill those gaps. Next slide. I'm gonna pause there for a moment. There's a question. Leo?
No, I'll let you finish, Nadine. Sorry.
No problem at all. The second strategy was to review our existing accessible learning pathways and make improvements, as some of those included somewhat accessible schools, so they were not fully accessible. The goal here really, given the 3-week timeline and how to make the greatest impact across the board, we looked at a strategy that can be applied across all of the board, creating accessible learning pathways for all students. Next slide. This current image identifies what the current JK to 12 accessible pathways that exist at TDSB. So the red dots identify junior schools, green are middle, and the blue dots are secondary schools.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute. I happen to be totally blind, so I have no idea what's on the screen. Can you just tell me the total number of schools that are accessible, or the total number that are not? Now, by accessible, I don't mean partial. I mean the disability can
can learn at and not be limited where they go?
I don't have the number of schools directly in front of me. I'll have to come back to you on that. We currently have 13 accessible learning pathways, so JK to grade 12. And through these strategies, we'll be moving towards having 75. Or sorry, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And when you say that pathway from GD to K-12, to grade 12, that could be one elementary school and then one secondary school.
Correct. They come in different combinations. So it could be one elementary, one secondary, it could be one primary, one middle, one secondary, and schools that combined create a JK to grade 12.
Right.
Sorry, so this is the current, and the next slide identifies what the system will look like undertaking these projects. So we can see on the next slide that there's a significant amount of schools that have been added. All of the ones with a yellow circle around the dot are the projects are the schools that would be receiving projects to increase their accessibility across the system.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have no idea what you're looking at. Can you please give me a summary of what the protocol is?
Absolutely. So we're just looking at a map of the secondary attendance areas, identifying that the gap has diminished almost across the province. We're changing from 13 accessible learning pathways to about 75 accessible learning pathways. So increasing the number of accessible schools that students would have across the board. Of course. I'm just going to pause and ask Joyce if she has anything to add onto the maps and then that's why I'm staying through with those.
Sure, maybe. I'm just going to clarify, so can you go back to the previous map, if possible? So this map here shows as means that the current fully accessible pathways that exist. So it's actually 5 JK to 12 pathways, 13 schools in total that are within these accessible pathways. And then if you go into the next map, we'll now have 32 fully accessible pathways from the previous 5, and 75 fully accessible schools within these 32 fully accessible JK to 12 pathways.
Thank you. Sorry, David, I apologize. I did have a school, no grade pathways. So we're moving from 13 fully accessible schools to 75.
And the total number of schools are different numbers. 580. TDSB.
So it's around 580, yes. I don't have the exact number right now.
So right now, before this project, are 579 schools, only 13 were accessible.
So I just want to clarify, it's 13 fully accessible schools within fully accessible JK to 12 pathways. So there might be other fully accessible schools outside of these accessible pathways. We're only looking at the JK to 12 pathway and how many schools within that pathway were fully accessible throughout that entire grade range. So outside of that grade range, outside of those pathways, there might exist fully accessible schools, but because maybe the junior school is not accessible or the secondary school is not accessible at all, we didn't consider them a fully accessible pathway.
But I want to make sure there's time for questions. Do you have much more to present, or do you have any questions?
I will have 4 more slides, so we can certainly dive into questions. Richard?
Thank you very much. So I'm just looking online here. I just typed in TDSB accessible learning pathways. And again, an AI overview, it says the Toronto District School Board not have a single set of programs exclusively labeled accessible learning pathways, but rather provides a range of inclusive strategies. So put that aside for a moment. I think of Halloween that I just passed the other day. Noticed one of my neighbors had a plastic lawn sign out that basically said accessible trick or treating at his property. You go to a restaurant, you see the Visa or the Amex symbol in the window, you know to accept those cards. I'm curious, does the TDSB, first of all, have some definition that we shared with SEAC today as to what accessible learning pathways are, what's defined as, what it looks like, so we have an understanding of that. But also, where, either on the TDSB website or with appropriate accessible signage on school doors, or somewhere on the property doesn't identify that this building is accessible and meets the criteria. We have 13 already. So is there any signage, including, as I say, accessible signage, so braille or whatever else needs to be on there to ensure people know that that building is fully accessible, et cetera? Is there anything that's out there now? Any plans to do this? Thank you.
And just, before you answer, we're keeping the speakers list, so if you don't mind, I will obviously let you question, but feel free to answer Richard's.
Thank you very much for the speakers list. I appreciate that. I can't hear going up and down. I see you're unmuted, so I'm guessing you may answer everything that you'd like to drop in the chat.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard, appreciate the question and through the chair. So, TDSB has on every school webpage information about whether the building is accessible, partially accessible, or fully accessible. And when we were diving into this initiative, trying to do a little bit of a roundup of information that is available, recognizing that the last major survey that we did was in 2016 of the schools. However, the ministry a few years ago included accessibility when they started doing their facility condition assessments. So every 5 years, the school will be assessed in terms of the room renewal needs in that building. And a few years ago, the ministry added some accessibility criteria in that assessment. So we are hoping in about a year, we will be able to publish a little bit more information from those accessibility surveys that the ministry has undertaken. As I said, they only started 2 years ago. It takes about 5 years to go through all the schools at TDSB. But approximately 66% of our schools are not accessible. And then the other thing just to recognize, we have buildings that are maybe 10 years old, 15 years old. The building code has changed. So those schools would be accessible, but they would be considered non-compliant accessible because the building code did make some significant changes in accessibility from when those schools were built, meeting the accessibility requirements in the code of the day. So about 66% of our buildings are not accessible.
Okay, this is extremely helpful. I have a couple of questions and more of this. Just whoever you wish to answer the accommodation, whether it works. I'm delighted to hear about this effort. This is the first we've heard of this kind of effort in a long time. We've raised these issues over the years. I've been in a SEAC. You keep using the term fully accessible, and I'm wondering, or accessible, what is the standard you are using? Is it twice what the current building code, or what is it?
Do you want me to take that one, Maya? When we use the term fully accessible and partially and somewhat, those are terms that were defined in the report speaking of that was completed in 2016. That's available for each one of the schools. As the building code does continue to change, in 2016 they looked at it not remaining navigate through the school? Does it have components of barrier-free access or visual fire alarms or signage or obstacles along the way, and use kind of the evaluation criteria that was defined within those reports to identify that system along those schools?
Here's some of the reports from the province.
These were done through TDSB.
Okay, what criteria did they use though? Did they use the current building code or something?
The 2016 ones used the current code. In 2016, when we undertake these projects on a moving forward basis, it would be to the most current code.
All right, this raises a very serious concern that I want to present to you. Building code is widely known by accessibility advocates and experts, fall woefully short on accessibility. Any study videos I've created that have gotten thousands of views, a lot of media attention, because the government built a new courthouse or a new university building that got built by a university, which is code compliant, but which is replete with disability problems. And so if you're, and we had a presentation by a leading accessibility expert, built environment accessibility expert, some years ago, talking about exactly this. So if the measure, and when I talked to the Ministry of Education people about this some years ago, they were just using the building code of the accessibility criteria for disability tax standards, but there are no accessibility criteria for disability standards except regarding service cameras and TV blocks. Everything else is outside buildings. So my worry for you is twofold. I got a solution. The worry I got is you're using the wrong standard, and it's leading you to the school is accessible or by certain measures will be when it won't. And related to that, the examples of barriers in your document that I'm personally able to read, and in your comments relate to physical mobility disabilities, vision loss, and hearing loss. Well, hearing loss for sure. I don't even know if vision loss is in there, which is pretty much what the building code does. It leaves out tons of disabilities that lead to problems getting around the built environment. And I'm concerned, look, whatever you do, if it's an improvement, it's an improvement. But it's important for you to be looking at the right standard before you tell people it's an accessible school if it's not. And the good news, there is a comprehensive document that was submitted to the Ministry of Education 2.5 years ago that outlines what an accessible school should be like. I know why, because I was when I brought in the very same expert came and spoke to us. It's in the K-12 Standards Development Committee final report, and email me after, I'm happy to send it to you. But you may look at it and say, well, we can't do all this with the money we got. And my answer is, yeah, you can't do all that with the money we got. But there are things that you could do. In fact, a number of things that don't cost much at all. And if you can factor this into what you do this year or next year, I would be happy myself to be available and to connect with people who know about this. But I don't need you to, I mean, you're welcome to comment, but I just want to offer you that feedback. Maya, go ahead.
Very much, David, and just to say, I have read that document, I followed it very closely, and I think there is a lot that we can learn from that document, and we certainly will look at it. I do want to point out, this funding is for existing buildings. We are going to be challenged in some cases by the sheer force of trying to make major changes to existing buildings. We always want to do the best And, you know, believe me, my team are very excited and dedicated to getting this project underway because it is the first time we've had this kind of funding for existing buildings. I think the other thing is that document is very good learning for us as we go forward to build new schools in particular, where we have more ability to, through the design of the building, to reflect the things that are mentioned in that document. I do remember seeing some of the videos that you did, in particular the one at Toronto Metropolitan University, the Student Center, which I've gone to visit, and it's unbelievable that that is a building that meets the building code. So it is accessible under the building code, and everything you talk about in your video about that building is very, very true. So I thank you for bringing that. We will look at that. We will, you know, reflect on what things we can control and change in this process. But I also want to go back to the presentation because we have a real challenge here. We have exactly, how many months did you say, Nadine? 10 months? 10 months to make some significant changes. No one can build an elevator in 10 months in Ontario. So we have thought about how we can make the biggest difference in some of these schools, which is get out an elevator as well as do some of the other work. And TDSB, our strategy is to actually go beyond just the funding that they have provided. And I would like, we could just finish the presentation, and then we can open it up for questions. So Nadine, if you want to continue.
Sure. Not sure if the presentation.
Sorry, but it's been lost this from, just give me a second.
No worries. I think there's also a question in the chat, Richard, so I will, I was just looking online to see if I can pull it to fill in for you, but that's something.
While we're waiting, Richard asked if he could provide, and I agree with the criteria for assessing things, and that would be great. Or you want to just put your question out so they answer. Sure. Just while they're getting there.
So yes, two things. Clarification on my question. So my understanding is we have 13 locations or areas in the city where a child has these ambulatory needs, if you have these revisions. There are 13 locations where a child can go to kindergarten, can get to grade 12, and stay. And they're trying to turn out into 7 locations where a child can go to the local school, start from kindergarten, get to grade 12, and then be physically accessible in these accessibility changes. So it's not my part understanding, because that's, I really appreciate the attention to detail to try and make that feasible for kids to be able to kind of go to schools and I appreciate that the time constraints in the ministry classes are so short. So I appreciate a lot of the effort into that. I was going to ask our director a favor to emphasize to the supervisor that this is not representation of accessibility, it's part of accessibility, that these changes address absolutely physical barriers for some of our students. But I know means this is a comprehensive address all accessibility issues. So I get worried when I see things called the accessibility plan, because I think people say then that, then everybody can go, but that wouldn't address the concerns of delegated or staffing or other spaces that are available for the child or the human resources. So just hoping you can pass that along to the supervisors, since I would normally say that that's easy to happen. So the supervisor usually this is not representation. And then the last question actually is, what do we tell schools that are not accessible to do with child registers needs what are the principles to so that not going to school using a wheelchair or a rocker? What is that?
Thanks, Nora, for the question. So as Maya shared, we have quite a few schools that are not accessible. And so we actually will, in that moment, try to find the closest to the student's home address that is accessible. And we would ask the student to register there. We couldn't have a student, if there is a situation where something could be done, like a rack could be put in and it could be done quickly, of course, we do work very closely with the planning department to see what we can put in place quickly, but if it's something, as Maya said, an elevator can't be built in a few months, then we would go to the next closest accessible.
And for partially accessible, where the child will be on the floor, our principals direct to make sure that the services paid for, rather than recommend. So they get in, out of paid for, paying for. Are they told they have to move things?
Correct, and those conversations are had with individual families as well, because sometimes there are other situations and other factors that we do take into consideration. But I'll give you an example of, we move a library or we move something else, or even a classroom. There's also restrooms that need to be accessible, so if there's not an accessible restroom in an area, we have to ensure, folding tables and restrooms and the like. So it's more than just a classroom or a ramp. There are lots and lots of other pieces that also need to be accessible.
And are they a script to make sure that the student isn't switched on? So you can imagine how, if like, let's say a school has to be for situation where it's like, oh, we used to be on the second floor, now we're on the first floor, so we used to whatever, that happens. So how do we protect the child from hearing the blame?
Of course, Nora, that's a collaborative conversation with the school, and the school principal does not work in isolation, so they will reach out to special education, they will reach out to Maya's team in planning, and we work together. And if there is a situation where that is happening, please let us know so we can address it, but we are really optimistic that our schools are welcoming and inclusive spaces for all of our students and families.
Hey, I'm gonna kick it back to Maya and ask if, just for good passion over time. Can you folks wrap up at this point in about 5 minutes? Presentation, or should we, put it back?
No, I think we can wrap up. Go ahead, Nadine.
Yep, we're just on the last couple slides, and do it in 2 minutes. So just hearing the sentiment of what everyone said, this is not addressing accessibility at every school, and this is really just a starting place. It's the first step, and hopefully our ability to make big strides towards accessibility across the board. In speaking with the ministry, they did collect a lot of data, actually a massive inventory of the accessibility of all of our schools. And we're hopeful that that will continue to be the premise to advocate for additional funding in the future. We're hoping that this is the start of something that can continue. The next couple of slides just identify the proposed locations of schools, so that's available for everyone to review after. I'm not going to go through it, and I'm just looking at the last slide in terms of our next steps and where we currently are. We did put out a request for a proposal for architectural firms to hire consultants to undertake the design work for these projects. Where we are, majority of site visits and assessment have been done by internal staff, and we'll be conducting those with the successful architectural firms once awarded. To establish what the final project list is, so we propose the list of schools based on the geographical locations and the learning pathways that we talked about. However, as I mentioned, our schools range significantly in age and infrastructure, so we do need to confirm whether this work is feasible or not feasible, so that list may need to be refined, and where we are able to undertake the work commenced with it. For the presentation.
Great, thank you very much. If others have questions, I just want to add one last comment as we wrap up. First, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for doing it, given the horrendous timelines you've been in front of us to get this done. You talked about engaging architects. I immediately get worried. Yeah, nothing against architects, all my friends are architects. They are not trained on accessible design. They're trained at most on building. I know for people who work in the field that you can end up spending money making mistakes. Unless you have a qualified built environment accessibility consultant on the project, they usually have to clean up the mess. I'm not looking for anyone who should be involved in any decisions, but I strongly suggest if this is an accessibility project, you've got to bring in a built environment accessibility specialist on the design, or you're going to find out that things didn't go where you wanted them to go. Anyway, thank you so much. If we can get the slides circulated to us, and if they can be put in a form that's accessible, so if you need supporters or images,
Sure. The slides were mailed out as part of the to all members.
Okay, I didn't have a system. I did got it from TDSB.
Correct. The other piece I wanted to just take up to move this headline and her team. And as much as there are certain challenges that they have, and the funding and the program that is probably solve all problems, I just want to go back to the wonderful news of almost $48 million at the TDSB that was given to us as part of the program to make our buildings more accessible. Recognize that will solve all problems for all students, but certainly goes a long way. And I recommend for the quick turnaround and the creative approach that they've taken in maximizing fully.
Thanks. Let's now pick up our conversation we were engaged in last month. If we need more time after this one, we will continue it because this is an ongoing thing. We were briefed by staff on the staff action plan that they're implementing. And you have an opportunity to get feedback on it. At the time last month, you heard it live, and then we're getting feedback on the spot. Now I have a chance to review the summary that was circulated, that was presented to us. And this is a chance, if something is we would like to see added via our special education advisory committee, this is your chance to give your advice. To assist you in that, I circulated a couple of documents, which personally I think would benefit the public to see, which are the feedback from those of us on the working group that gave it to the school board staff on this. And a lot of that feedback derived from what we heard from you, from the SEAC table, and from the town hall we did last year. And there's a list of what we all sort of consolidated, added more points from me on one area, and added points from Laura on one area. And if you think those are worthwhile, they're part of our advice. And a significant number of those recommendations were detailed, were concrete, were accurately measurable, and unfortunately weren't in the action plan. Everything, but we're being asked for feedback. It's our chance to give feedback. So Tracy will keep a speakers list See? Right, well then, moves things forward more quickly. Well, staff may be coming back to us in the action plan from time to time, whenever they said they want to fix something to us, happy to discuss it. If you have any feedback you want to give separately, just email Leanne and that's the avenue you've got available. Okay, this is a dramatic moment in SEAC history. This is a subject that we've wanted to discuss for months. And I've asked Nancy to be ready for months. Every time she was ready, we ran out of time. We never asked her time. But this is an important subject. So maybe, believe it or not, this is it. There are, what's the question here? The question here is one that we heard delegates presenting to us have raised, any number of members around this table have raised. People giving feedback to our associations and raised. If your child has a disability or special education needs, and is in either a regular class or a special education class, and needs what you believe to be more support than they're getting, if the principal says, oh, I know you'd like to have more EA time for your child, but we don't have more EA time, sorry. Not available. I've asked Nandy to talk to us about one thing, how these staff are allocated, the support, the added supports that are available for our kids, and who decides where they go, and if we're told by a principal, I'm sorry, we just don't have the staff support for your child, that added support. We know the process that we've been told is the concerned parent protocol, go to the teacher, go to the principal, go to the superintendent, but what happens at the other end? What, is it true that a principal can simply say, I don't have any more EAs, and so therefore all I got is going up? Or what else goes on at TDSB? So this is our chance to hear how that is dealt with at the staff end, as a result of which undoubtedly people have questions. So maybe, believe it or not, here we go.
Thank you. So with regards to support staff allocation and teaching staff allocation, both this evening, as you know, the ministry provides to school boards or districts staffing based on their enrollment. From that enrollment, we are given funds that we dedicate towards staffing, whether that's support staff or teaching staff or so many other staffing, including psychologists, speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, members of our autism team, registered behavior analysts. They're all listed in our special education plan, all of the staff that we support students with disabilities and special education. So our first role is, of course, to allocate within financial limits, and Greg Snyder has been here enough times, and will be back again in December, January. And as you know, most school boards, including the TDSB, provides more funding for special education beyond what we're given. We actually provide staffing based on a needs model, which is by knowing students and schools and what the needs are within those schools. It's a collaborative and transparent process that is worked upon by staff within the department, as well as principals and superintendents. And of course, another principle of staffing allocation is that we must comply with all legislative as well as collective agreement requirements. With regards to support staff allocation, as you know, in TDSB, we offer a range of programs and services. So we have our regular classrooms, classroom supports, which we refer to as resource staffing. And then we have our intensive support programs for ISPs that need to be staffed as per the ministry guidelines, and those again are found in the special education plan. And so we staff our intensive support programs as well as our regular programs based on those factors. We also staff our central staff, so that would be staff that work in the department that support and build capacity and our consultants and coordinators as well. With regards to support staff within the TDSB, we have educational assistants, special needs assistants or SNAs, child and youth workers for secondary and elementary, and we also have to staff the noon hour assistant or the lunchroom supervisor, so that comes out of special education staff as well, and of course the teachers. Other support staff include deaf-blind interveners, sign language facilitators as well. At the regional or central level, in terms of department staff, we have our registered behavior analysts, as I said, that serve as part of the Autism Regional Services team. And we have central unassigned special needs assistants that we can send in for transition students who are transitioning across schools that might require some additional supports. We also have adaptive technologists and orientation and mobility instructors, and we have a blind and low vision librarian. These are all positions that are staffed from the special education budget. So how do we determine how to allocate support staff? Teaching staff is, again, based for resource based on student needs within the school, based on enrollment, and our ISPs, one teacher per classroom, as you know. Key drivers that influence the allocation of support staff include the number of students at a given school, the needs of the students at a given school, whether the school has intensive support programs, and how many. So the school has 4 intensive support programs, as an example, or more, in addition to providing the 1 teacher and the 1 support staff per classroom. We would give additional staffing to circulate amongst those 4 or more classrooms, but also, depending again on student needs, they may also get additional support staff. And of course, another key driver is fiscal responsibility or staying within the amount that we're given, but as I said earlier, we do allocate, the TDSB does allocate more towards special education. So the non-negotiables include our legislative ratios for our intensive support programs, and this would be in our integrated sites as well as our congregated sites, which must have at minimum 1 teacher and 1 support staff, but most of our intensive support programs have more than 1 support staff that could be in a classroom for part or all of the day. And the final determination is made in consultation with superintendents to ensure local decision making. The superintendents know the schools and know their principals, in addition to our staff, our consultants, coordinators, and assemblies and principals. We look at the individual student needs. We also look at the combination of students within a classroom and what their needs would be. And we also look at the school itself, as Maya mentioned earlier. TDSB schools are built very differently. Some of them are very old schools, some of them are very small classrooms. So it's a very small classroom, or if a school has a number of small classrooms, then we have to have an additional class, which would have an additional teacher and support staff. So each school is looked at on an individual basis, and the needs are looked at on an individual basis. So as you know from budgeting presentations to SEAC, special education staffing allocations are structured and must be used to support special education programs and services. We work collaboratively with a number of departments within the TDSB, so we provide the allocation, meaning the number of staff for the school. Our human resources department, which is called our people and culture department, they actually support staffing the allocation. And the schools, through the school principal, manage the staffing process in terms of how they're timetabling the staff that have been given to them. And they also look after filling staff absences at the staff level. So that is just an idea of, I had extra time, of how staffing is allocated across the TDSB to support students with disabilities and such.
Okay, well, because of that extra time, I want to invite questions. Okay, good. So, I want to create this scenario I mentioned, like parent their child either needs, they think, PA or needs, really got money in school, there's not enough time for their child. And a principal says to them, I'm not getting into all the micro details. Let's assume the principal says, I'd like to if I could, I don't have any more. And we've heard from parents, we have parents on SEAC who were given an understood stand that the buck stops there. And the conversation I've had with you, I understand the buck may not stop there. What should happen in that situation?
So David, anytime there are needs that are occurring in a school, our school principals reach out to the department to look at what can happen. So supports can take many forms, not just another staff member full-time at the school. As I mentioned during my briefing just now, we have central teams that can go in to work with the classroom teachers and the classroom staff, as well as the entire staff within the school or a particular division as well. If a parent is requesting staff, of course, I wish we had staff to give every parent or every student a one-to-one support. However, we actually go in and take it very seriously, and we look at what are the needs of the students, how are the existing staff members being used, and how can we continue to do that. And of course, we do have a whole backup staff that we keep for in-year needs, and we do provide that if necessary and needed. So there is a process that principals are very fully aware of. I want to be very clear that at no point should the school principal be saying to a parent, I'm sorry, I can't support your child here.
Okay, Laura, Latoya, Jessica, and Richard. And as they're speaking, if others want to raise your hand, just raise your hand, please.
Thank you for that. So one thing I would very out of special ed speaking in our college. So if the entire salary for the ISP teachers, each one of those students is entitled to $7,800 from the general grants for all teachers. So special ed should always exceed. Envelope is their entitled to money from everybody, is it for everybody? And this is not that. So I always encourage a little bit to that statement that it's that it places our students as we. So just stating my objection to use that phrase, and everyone else I said that.
If I may, I just want to be clear that when we say that, it's in no way to say it's a burden. It's actually to say we prioritize certain students with disabilities and special education needs that we will give more when it's needed.
And I have to say, in all other boards around, I did not, I really respect the fact that it was trying to hold on to what it has, and other schools. Wait. My question is, how do you track how many families are contacting you that are not having solutions? So what's the central tracking system? So that you can go to the ministry and say you have insufficient funds. At some point, it's the duty to accommodate. So if we have families that are facing partial dates or calls coming out that are early today, how are you tracking how many requests that is and bring it to the ministry? But you don't have sufficient funds to be used.
Okay, I can start, Mandy, and then please feel free. So, Nora, what I was going to say is absolutely we agree with you. Our positioning at the special education grant is that it is it's incremental, and that's the position of the ministry as well. It is meant to be an incremental support fund for students with special education needs, and our students with disabilities and special education needs have access to all of the grants for functioning of the board. Your question as to how we track when a parent is asking for additional support, we don't track that per se, that's not a data point that we collect. What we do, of course, is that work with that family, we analyze the needs of the student, and make sure that they are supported. I would say that I think, in working at the ministry and working in 3 boards and supporting all boards in the province, the request for additional funding for special education is a very constant and consistent theme from board to board. Yeah, I think that's why when the ministry goes and has their consultations, there are opportunities to be hearing that, and we have seen adjustments to the grants within special education grants very large. And I think from the ministry's perspective, they would say that they increased the amount of funding, and of course, we would say we would welcome more. And that is universally held, certainly I know by all on the room and in the meeting. We want to be supporting students to the very best of our ability, and having additional support would be very, very powerful.
I have no doubt that you guys will love me. I'm just curious about how we communicate. I'm very pleased that you're constantly communicating, but the board needs more constant needs. I guess my question ultimately is who holds the duty to accommodate, and that's not happening. How are we sure?
Right, so we hold the duty to accommodate, right?
Not the province in the end.
So I think that that is a conversation that is not to be responded to by me, and I'm representing the ministry. I perhaps would encourage different pathways for those in that question.
Okay, great, thank you. And last question is why are we doing lunches with special education? I think most schools.
Thanks, Nora. They are all students in those classrooms we do pay for, and we do pay for the teachers as well as the prep that's provided.
This is
ISP.
okay. I misunderstood that.
No. I tested support programs. And to add to Louise's comments, I just want to share as well that the ministry, in addition to the funding that's provided through the core funding, they also provide what was previously called PPS, now REPs, Responsive Education Program, so we get some additional fundings there and we maximize that. And we also apply for grants. I've provided updates to SEAC on grants that we are successful in getting through very long, exhaustive application processes, and we just actually got approved for 2 more grants. I'll be bringing that in December to share with SEAC. So we try as best as we can to maximize all possible funding sources, and also to seek out funding sources through grants and the like.
I should answer you the cluster type and families. There's no shortage. So we're trying to reconcile the watches our work on the cars, but still struggling for students. And our job is to convey something right now isn't being but change is very
Looks like
If I quit, for staff, but there are also, I guess, I'm gonna use the word inappropriate responses right now. I'm actually working for which everybody is right now. That really speaks to the fact that there are students who are, or families who are being told that the school does not have funding for that special education staff. So it is, how are we addressing those situations? And how are we recognizing for that family that that is occurring? And the efforts that we missed making sure that we're hearing the voices out and we're, it's something you said, I'm sure that, that's my, first,
Latoya, can you just reframe your question? I'm not sure I captured.
Sure. So, for those families, I guess the framework is acknowledging that, yes, there might be, efforts made, where, there are good general efforts made, those support staff and the languages that Chris will share are there, but we're sort of stepping aside from that right now, focusing on those families who are hearing that there is no funding for, those, special education teachers. Some schools, for example, don't have a special education teacher, or they had it before, but they would come through, even though kids are there that needs the support, that were there previous year. They're, still there. So what are we doing now that we know that, that is existing to help support those, schools? What changes are being considered, to make sure that those families are getting the support that they need? See that, those funding, I guess, is there for it.
So all of our schools have some level of special education teacher support, as well as support staff support. And every time we do the staffing, we actually look at that. Smaller schools may have less. There's some smaller schools that have more. There are a number of factors that go into it. However, every school has special education supports. If a family is being told that, and I said that before, no principal should be saying that, there's always a problem-solving process to work through with the superintendent, with the department, that we can look at various forms of support. And that could be central support, that could be additional staff, it could be professional learning for the staff to build their capacity as well. So we have supports that we use to best meet the needs of the students across the district in regular classrooms as well as intensive.
Yeah, and I do agree with that, but it's, given that we know, and it's being misspoken here by others as well, that this is a problem that is existing. I think most of us are going to see that exists. But for a few families, that process is extremely exhausting to navigate. I've heard of so sad that, reached out to the special education department, escalated, escalation, and it's been exhausted. So what can we do now for those families? We of those families that they know that it exists, but there's a consistent claim that this is based on provincial funding that's not provided to the school. That gas housing experience. What can we do now to make changes going forward?
So as always, please let us know if someone's coming to you. We need to know so that we can look at it. I want to be really clear too that there are, families that have, feel that this is what my child needs, and then we do the assessments, we go in and we do the observations and so forth, and the school communicates what the student actually does need. So there is that piece. In the meeting mail, there was also a letter from the Durham District School Board that is shared with all SEACs that they wrote to the ministry as well. So there is a role for TDSB SEAC to play when it comes to budget and funding with the ministry as well. However, if you're hearing a family saying that they're encountering issues, please refer them to the principal or the superintendent. They can always come to the department and we work with them, school-based staff, to address their concerns.
And I think just this closing, I think, it's not more of us, it's more of a comment that, what we have to sort of recognize is that parents with kids with special needs, they're not only coming to TDSB, for example, they're also navigating the healthcare system. They're navigating their own life experience. I know of a family there is that they're dealing with a senior parent, right? And for other families, we're going to be able to see senior parent plus the additional case. So this is exhausting for them, but they do know that they understand for the system. We give very much out and the best responses continue to be that there is support, but then when they navigate that period, protocol, response to that aspect is they're dependent on funding. So it's, I hope that, there's a way for to see those parents and to be able to, appreciate the difficulties of actually that. I would love to share our wins with some of those parents that just said, I'm so sick and tired, I just can't do it anymore. They no longer want to be. What I'm encouraging is maybe just looking at ways that we can change so it goes back.
Well, thank you very much. Jessica, and then Rich, and then me.
I have a couple of different questions. So when you were giving the presentation, you mentioned that for ISPs, this is something that comes up a lot. That is not the case. There is not the additional support that is provided. So it is not
Jessica, not for gifted eyes.
Right.
But there may be support staff depending on the needs of the students within a gifted ISP.
Right. I was going to get to that. So gifted classrooms often contain many presents. And I am fully aware of this school routinely says, sorry, we have one SMA. You're in an ISP, you don't get any additional support. You just don't. And so it's difficult to sit here and reconcile what we see on the ground. Saying with what we hear, I would love it if what you're saying is true. Not in the sense that like I do not in any shape or form want to be like trying to be dishonest with us. But the reality is that parents don't match. And as we heard from our delegation at the beginning, parents are really afraid that there will be retaliation against them. It would be escalate beyond principle. Because what happens in the school is very much influenced by adults in the building. The other point that I just wanted to clarify was, on average, how long does it take to get central staff for in situations where you so if you can ask me for support since September and they show up in June, yes, they did show up. But it's not really long.
So I lead a department that is consistently told by school-based staff that we are the most responsive department. I'm not aware of any referrals coming in for support from the special education department that has come in and not been seen until June, unless they've come in later on in the spring and they've gone in June. So we're very responsive. I don't have a timeline to give you because we have multiple regional services teams and they have different timelines as to when they go in. We also may have another team that's going in, Jessica, and so the second or third team might go in at a later time. But I'm not aware of a team going in, a whole school year later. But certainly we can be looking at our numbers. We're very responsive and we do go in through the referral process that principals access regional services teams.
Richard. Oh, by the way, Jessica's theme about we're suggesting Andy's anyway, anything about there is a gap between what we hear and what the staff, what we hear from parents in front lines is the thing that we've had at this table before. And that's why SEAC is so important. As a venue for that dialogue to take place. Richard.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Andy and Louise, for your insights on the process and what metrics are not tracked. And, as David noted, it's a common theme we're talking about. Andy said, if we hear it through our representation of parents and SEAC, we should bring it back, send it back to the principal or to central staff, etc. I keep hearing miscommunication, misunderstanding, misinterpretation. But you know what? If you look at this, there's a process in place, the board has a process in place for dealing with these requests of more supports needed for an individual student. So I would simply suggest, not create another form from the TDSB, but a very, very simple form, one-sided, that basically the principal can fill in, check off, when a parent or a teacher or staff requires additional support for a student with special needs, got a date on it, it's got the school's name on it, they write down what the procedure otherwise that the student needs, and this form be fast tracked, copy gets given to the parent, the principal keeps a copy, and a parent copy goes to the special education department, and we're hearing over and over, we don't have funding, we don't have staffing, we know this is a very common theme, so let's simplify this, put it on a form, put these check boxes on there. I know nobody wants to hear it, but it's the reality of what we're hearing. Then it's in writing. And if the board's not willing to do this, I recommend and suggest to any parent that if the principal, they're hearing this from the principal, they ask the principal to write this out on school letterhead for that school, sign and date it, and give it to the parent, so the parent can take the special education department. Because we know this theme is common, it's repeated, and there really is no solution in place at this time. It's all, and I guess it is individual education planning, obviously, but let's formalize it, let's figure a way to fast track it, so we don't keep repeating these conversations. The principal said, there's no funding, I don't have support staff, and let's resolve the problem, once and for all. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. I want to pick up on two things that come from prior meetings. Like reference that, and both of them I mentioned to staff in advance. Other in my shares. Maybe you or Louise, can you give us the response to the delegation last spring and complained that the ministry allows for multi-disability classes with smaller class size. TDSB has some junior donate.
Thanks, David. So as you know, each school district must have a special education plan that aligns with legislation as well as ministry policy. TDSB special education plan, which outlines all of our programs and services, is compliant with all ministry regulations and requirements. So the ministry defines multiple exceptionality as a category of exceptionality, and we do use that in TDSB. It is in our special education plan, and it's defined as a combination of learning or other disorders, impairments, or physical disabilities requiring special education services and support. If a student meets the criteria for one of the ministry identified exceptionalities, the student is granted that exceptionality in the TDSB. However, placement is determined by individual strengths and needs and not just the exceptionality category. So we have the identification, which is based on the exceptionality category, and then we have the placement, which is based on strengths and needs and the exceptionality category as well. So the ministry allows school boards to determine what programs and services they offer. So some school boards, for example, have no ISPs or self-contained special education classes. Some, like TDSB, has exceptionality-based special education classes. So the Education Act gives school boards broad discretion in providing special education programs and services. There's no legislative or ministry requirement to create a specific multiple exceptionalities placement. So on the one hand, we have the exceptionality, and on the other hand, we have the placement. And like I said, the special education plan has to outline placements, programs, and services that are responsive to the student population, and as you know, it's reviewed annually by the ministry. So with regards to the assertions that were made, Regulation 298 does set maximum class sizes for special education classes, whether they're gifted, they're MID, mild intellectual disability, developmental disability. And it does state that for a class with students where there are students with multiple handicaps, not multiple exceptionalities, where no one handicap is dominant, it is a class of 6. For students that have multiple exceptionalities, again, not handicapped, different exceptionalities, the class size is actually 16. So handicap and exceptionality are distinct terms, and multiple handicaps does not mean multiple exceptionalities. And there's no obligation to create a class for students with multiple exceptionalities, which would be 16, nor to cap them at 6 students. As you know, we have our ASD, our autism classes, which are capped at 6 because the legislation clearly states that it needs to be at 6. So that is an explanation of the identification or exceptionality of multiple exceptionality and then a placement option.
I get your point that the ministry doesn't require you to have a multiple disability or whatever term you use class, but you can't. No. Very policy reason. That's what this group was asking for. Putting voice to their question.
Did you say is there a policy breach?
No, is there a policy reason why the TDSB doesn't do it?
So the TDSB doesn't have multiple exceptionality classes. We place students based on their strengths and needs in the existing ISPs that we do have. And again, if we were to put students in a class with multiple learning differences, it would be a class of 16. Our classes right now follow the ministry class size cap, so our developmental disability classes are 10, our mild intellectual disability classes are 12, 14, 16, depending on the division, primary, junior, intermediate, gifted 25, and so forth. Autism is at 6.
The other question I wanted to ask was, as you know, this committee was very concerned when it came last May, raised the maximum ceiling size diagnostic kindergarten level disability classes. A number of people are in favor of it. And the trustees did not vote for that to happen. The staff talked afterwards to the supervisor of the committee, reversed that decision and made tax changes. We were there. That decision was made. I have asked in writing if they help us, and I asked the director of education here could take back our meeting and get an answer to this. How many actual classes had their raised? How many kids are affected by this?
Thanks, David. So the adjustments to the diagnostic kindergarten classes and junior mild intellectual disability MID ISPs, which bring them in line with provincial class size caps, the MID junior, have actually resulted in more students having immediate access to these programs and a reduction in our wait list for them. Currently, there are 14 more students being served across 47 diagnostic kindergarten classes, and 24 more students being served across 22 junior MID ISPs in the TDSB. And as we've stated before, and SEAC members have stated, there have been no reductions in staffing levels for special education across the district.
That's really helpful information, but I just still want to repeat the question. How many of the classes are there, like, of the decades that are just years, are they all raised, half of them raised, or 5 of them raised?
Thanks, David. So at this point, less than 10 of our classes have been, of the DP classes, have been raised.
Okay, what about the
MID classes, I believe, less than 6 currently, but please keep in mind that as the year progresses.
Oh, yeah, you can evolve, you can evolve, very much. But I think this kind of information, as I suggested, when this came up in the spring, makes a difference. If it was all of the classes, there would be a lot of people concerned. If it was 2 or 3 classes, a lot of people might, otherwise might be concerned, might be not as big a deal. Numbers are at least informative.
Thank you, David. And I just want to add one more thing. We're talking about the higher ends, but please keep in mind that we also have diagnostic kindergarten ISPs, as well as all of our ISPs that actually are well below, have less than even half of what the class size caps would be. So we do have classes with less than 5, less than 8 students.
Right. Yeah, that's really helpful also. Nora will be the last.
Sure, I'm hoping that maybe access and right now, because no, affordability of so I think that's part of that population.
So Nora, as outlined in our special education plan, we do have students that have more than one exceptionality, and the TDSB is reported as their primary exceptionality. So I do recall the parents and the delegations that really what it was about was placement so that the class size could be smaller at 6 students. With regards to the exceptionalities, we focus on the students' strengths and areas of need, and so their primary exceptionality is listed, followed by their secondary, followed by a third if there's a third. So that is how they are captured in the TDSB.
And I would say, right, that special education.
No, so if a student has multiple exceptionalities for which no one is dominant, we have it in our special education plan that we have multiple exceptionalities outlined by the ministry. This is what I stated earlier in terms of identification. That student would get their identification of multiple exceptionality if there is no one that is dominant. I believe there was language in the special education plan that we are looking at amending for next year to make it clear that if there is a student that has no one dominant, and the committee decides that there needs to be a multiple exceptionality, we are not to go against the ministry and the legislation and not be it.
It's just saying a little. Trouble believing that 40,000 population, special education, no one child.
Yeah, we talk about this.
I'm not saying I know, large sample size.
We do a lot of work with our psychology team, and they are the ones that conduct the psych assessments, as you know, and we are always looking at that, and they are saying that there is a dominant exceptionality, so that's the one that we put on the IPC. I provide answers every year, Nora, it's not ready as yet. Yeah, I provided it last year, we sent last year's, but I'm still waiting for this year's data.
Okay, let's move to the leadership report. This is maybe you should get. All right.
I love doing this data, I love it.
Go for it. Lead.
The end slides, please. Or Elizabeth. Okay, thank you. So I'm really excited to share that, as you know, on each professional activity day or professional development day, the Special Education and Inclusion Department offers a number of sessions for our support staff Support staff are very valued members of our staff, and we appreciate everything they do to support students with disabilities and special education needs. And we have listed there just some of the sessions that we will be offering on the PA days for our support staff. They include using Tier 1 strategies in the kindergarten classroom. We believe that from a very early age we need to support our early years learners. Building rapport and meaningful relationships with students with autism spectrum disorder, the science of applied behavior analysis, ABA, earliest communication skills, looking at word and speech and language pathologists, sensory regulation and connection with occupational therapy, physiotherapy, and understanding FASD, which is something that that we received feedback from SEAC that they wanted to see more sessions being offered to staff on supporting students with fetal alcohol syndrome disorder or FASD. Next slide, please. As many of you, I believe some of you were at the Parents as Partners and Caregivers as Partners Conference held on October 22nd and October 28th at David and Mary Thompson and West Concord Collegiate Institute. It was an open house format, and participants were allowed to drop in at any time that they wanted, and special education and inclusion staff were present on both days. We had staff represented from Autism Regional Services, Blind and Low Vision Regional Services, Deaf and Hard of Hearing Regional Services, our assistive technology team, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, psychological services, and speech and language pathology services. And at all of our tables or booths, we had lots of questions and were able to share resources with them. Next slide, please. Our November newsletter for parents, guardians, caregivers is now posted on our special education and inclusion website. And of course, last year, based on suggestion from SEAC, we added a button click here to subscribe. But in addition to that, we also sent out communication around our parent, guardian, caregiver newsletter in TDSB Connects, which goes to all families. And a third way that we communicate this is principals share in their or we ask them to share. I can't say that everyone of the principals do, but we ask them to share in their parent newsletter or blog or whatever they may share with their families. Next slide, please. And we are offering a number of parent engagement sessions for the 25-26 school year. They are all listed on the website, but we did hold 2 virtual sessions on work with staff to explore strategies and resources to help children develop their communication skills. Next slide, please. And on October 23rd, we held a drop-in session for parents, guardians, caregivers hosted by Autism Regional Services, and we had 26 families attend. They were given the opportunity to ask questions, access resources, and to receive guidance and strategies that support student success and inclusion at home and at school. Again, we found that the strategies we use in the classroom, if they're also used at home, we see much better uptake, if you will, in the students using these strategies. And again, all of our sessions, formal and informal, drop-in, virtual, are listed on the website, and we share them out through TDSB Connects with all families. Next slide, please. And I just shared this. This is just a list of all the sessions that we have for the school year listed on our website and shared out to families. And there's also a link in the report the SEAC members can share with their associations. Next slide, please. And we have, again, through ministry funding, the TDSB Transition Support website, both for educators and families, provide access to current resources, professional learning opportunities for staff, the internal one, the external one, families, learning sessions for families, planning tools and guidance for smooth and informed transitions for students with special education needs. We're talking about post-secondary opportunities, as well as how to apply for a passport, disability, working with the disability office, and lots and lots of resources there to support families. And we do have the fall grad fair that will be happening this month, and the closed captioning is hiding the date there for me. Just bear with me 1 second here, please. November 29th, and that will be held at York Mills Collegiate. And again, we have a good turnout each year, and it is a grad fair that we encourage families to come. Thank you, Leanne. And we have social work services there, as well as all of our special education teams that are available to answer questions and provide support. Please. And our after-school skills development program, the ministry gives us funding each year to offer an after-school skills development program for students with autism in grades 4 to 10. And the program is an opportunity for students to attend with their families to build and enhance their social communication skills. It's weekly sessions. Our fall session is about to start. November 7th was the deadline for registration. This year we are offering a fully virtual session, and I have to tell you that I was just told this morning, we have the largest sign up that we've ever had. So more families have signed up for the virtual sessions than ever before when we have hosted them in person. And this was one of our grants from last year that we applied for, and we were given funding from the ministry to remove barriers for students with disabilities. And it's a project led by occupational therapy services, and the focus of it is fostering relationships, understanding, and compassion of neurotypical and neurodivergent youth in the regular program. So some of you have asked me in the past, why is it for students with developmental disabilities, or why is it this topic in particular? And that's because many, if not all, of the ministry funds that we get, as Maya shared earlier with the planning team, they come with criteria of what responsibilities are. Next slide, please. And then we have our data that we provide, and that was
Okay, thank you. We've got questions from me, from the director. Two quick questions. Give you the heads up. One was, can you give us an update since June of the status of the special?
So we are currently awaiting some additional information in order to be able to share how we are going to be proceeding with the special education review. And as soon as we get that information, David will be sharing with SEAC.
Basically,
Yes, until we get some further information and direction.
okay, so we're ready for the right on hold.
Yeah, so the last time we met was at the end of June, and staff did some work over the summer, but I would say from the beginning of the school year.
And the other question, which maybe I will direct to Director of Education. Last meeting, we are very eager to hold another. Last January, when we were expressing an interest, we specifically, assistant director said we were against it, the reason that for the next 2 years, we gave the reason staff are too busy with special. Staff are not too busy with special. You agree to stop working with us. Thank you. Fall. The new year.
Thanks for that question. You did pose that question. Not all feedback from that last that report. And so first you have to
I'll just say quickly, speaking of this, I think it would be wrong to treat a lack of further questions about the action plan as an endorsement that it will have more opportunities. We wouldn't want to see that taken, but we voted on it. Express that view. Ronald.
Thank you, David. I am just Clayton, Mandy, Louise. I really can't believe that we're hearing this again. Clayton, I know you're new to this, but last year, I really can't tolerate Dave. And I'm not saying you're being paid directly, or Mandy individually, or Louise, but this is proof of being paid in the TDSB. How we are being told that we want to have these conferences, these parents as partners things. No, I'm wondering how many people actually showed up since COVID. The number has dropped drastically. The town hall is one of the most powerful ways for parents to not feel alone. It brings communities together, to feel that they can hear other parents that are drained and mentally tapped out, who can see and hear how much I'm frustrated with this as a parent. All those parents together feel alone until they come to community events like we have in the town hall. Instead, all I see is fake. I see so much money still being wasted by the TDSB, and I appreciate your long your descriptions of why you can't do it, but I cannot handle this anymore. I'm so sorry, but you are basically duct taping us and censoring us, and this is wrong. And now with what's happening as far as communication, all we get is scripted responses, whether it's by email, whether it's by talking
to face-to-face, we're lost, and really, I feel like there's no hope now.
Richard, and then Laura.
Thank you.
We're gonna go a little more over. Richard.
So, thank you. So back to, Danny, regarding the TDSB, the After School Skills Development Program. If I heard that correctly, it is only for exceptional students diagnosed with autism. And I'd like to know what SEAC and the board can do to ensure a greater, equity and access to the ASD program, because I can see it benefiting other students and not those only, with the exceptional autism. And I would also like to ask on the friendship community credit program on your slide, I didn't notice the word development disability, and I think we were presenting it, you mentioned that was the target group. How do we kind of get this out there? How do we expand some of these programs? I know the ministry is, as indicated, is, earmarking the money and very specifically stating what the money is for. But there's a lot of other students that could benefit. It doesn't seem equitable from what I just heard, and there's a lot of students, again, that are missing the opportunity for growth and being the best they can be, because they don't have access to these programs in the TDSB, and I ask why and what can we do? Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So as I stated, each of these funds came with specific criteria. So the after-school skills development program is specifically for, not only for students with autism, but students with autism in grades 4 to 10. So those funds were provided specifically for that. Similarly, the project that I shared was part of a larger grant that we applied for. That's called the Developmental Disability Grant, and we did branch out, you're correct, and other students in schools that wanted to participate would participate, and most of the schools that participated actually went beyond the classrooms to the whole school. So we are trying to expand wherever we can. In terms of what SEAC can do, certainly write into the ministry to ask, to acknowledge and share gratitude for the funds that they have provided for these two projects, and perhaps seek to receive additional funding so that we can offer similar programs to other students. Thanks.
Laura.
And I think when it comes to the action plan, project action plan, and very interesting ability measures that help out. So teachers can spend a lot of time, doing hard work. It doesn't result in creating special education was the chance of higher, we're actually resulting in all of these stuff before. So I've never been questioned by this team very hard, and I heard the list of people that she has to supervise and what. But we're hearing from families, they are struggling. They don't have a lack of hard work and so something is happening, and special education program review is a chance to ask directly. In the absence of that, and I like that in the sense that I think sometimes town halls, people who are motivated enough to have that experience. I think most of us probably are here as a fighting we have for all children. Whereas the survey was many of people who were having that experience. It's like, I'm sure there are people from all over that are having that experience. So without that program review, I don't know how to measure how well you're doing, no matter how much. And we're watching families fall through the cracks, and we don't know. The last, saying no to the town hall and saying we don't know what's happening in special education program review, and cross training, and editing our minutes is absolutely silencing this committee. There's no other way to take it. Don't want to hear our families, putting a program review on pause, will not live stream minutes or people. So I want to be supportive of stuff, I want to be a partner, but I am feeling very insulted.
Laura, as I said, we will be bringing more information as soon as we have more information to share on the review. And as you know, the live streaming was a ministry direction for the 5 boards that are under supervision.
We just have no other venue. We gotta do everything. I mean, we can write directly to the ministry about it. We are being supervised, if the supervisor came, that would be one. But they're not coming, so we have no choice to talk to our director about it, and I feel that way for laying on, but the supervisor sends you to us. This is how we're feeling.
Thank you for sharing, the level of frustration. And I very appreciate it. I also appreciate when you enact the law, the importance of how it may. I want to reassure you that certainly our commitment is to listen. Our commitment is to hear some reactions that are being taken, and they are not just. Now, I also recognize that while we take that there are still individual families that we need to continue to pay. And we will continue to do that. I also want to acknowledge the work of this committee and the role of the individual members of this committee of your constituents. That's also happening. The voices. The action plan. SEAC, response to the action plan, what and state steps to make through the actions that to make sure that things that are going to happen directly with students. When we look at, for example, forever, there has been consistent feedback around IEPs. Who's involved in the development? How regularly are the IEPs? How well do all teachers and staff know the IEP and use the IEP program for a student? How does IEP impact the assessments that are utilized for it? So forth. There's significant working plan around the IEP. No, that is for touching students' and their at their desks. So we are listening and we are paying attention. And we'll continue. I shared that the school year before the start of school, we had all administrators together for 2 days of training, 2.5 days of training on special education alone. In addition, well, we had additional time on other subject matters. Students paying attention to the intersection between other topics of dedicated time every administrator on special education. So there is work being done to address the open period. We need to continue to do that. And we need to monitor impact. That monitoring happens in place. The monitoring of the action that we're talking about, but also what about and how well our students doing in relation to the regular student population, other There's work being done. There's absolutely more work to do, but I don't want to hear no, none of this time. No, we're not listening.
I would like, because we are over time, thank everyone, I'm deferring Is there anyone who feels a real need for an association report? All right, I move that we adjourn, I second my motion. I'm in favor, we're adjourned.